Hello, how's it going? Welcome back. I'm your lead instructor, Gennaro, CEO of Quitech Solutions, and today we're going to be talking about cloud security. Now think back to all the times where we're looking at data on the premises, as in you have actual data within a data warehouse that you own as the customer, versus having your data stored in the cloud. Now this could be from a personal standpoint or a business standpoint as well too. Let's get started, shall we? Now, cloud security, just like all our other pillars of cybersecurity, it's going to be built upon confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is all about how we safeguard our assets, whether that's in an on-prem environment, as in on-premises, or what we're talking about today, in cloud environments. There's not too much difference there. So with businesses, and they're doing this at a very alarming rate. They're successfully migrating over to the cloud, using the services within the cloud. Using a cloud platform is going to give you a unique way of, doing business. Right? You now have the ability to have multi-tenant type of platforms, whether you're looking at, only the user or the customer or the third party will be able to access this potential resource. Or if you're talking about what does the customer or the CSP, the cloud service provider, what are they responsible for? You do that, or at least you go more in depth within a shared responsibility model. And then when it comes to being able to scale, that's one of the big key things that makes you stick out if you wanted to go to the cloud, or if you're scaling your business, you want to do so with cloud in mind. Now think back to the principles of everything. It's going to fall back on something, whether that be zero trust, secure by design, if we're talking about web, again, applications, or a model, a shared responsibility model. So what that looks like another example here, we have our cloud provider like AWS. And what we're going to do with AWS, at least from their standpoint, we're going to be able to secure the infrastructure, while the customer is going to be able to encrypt the actual data. So that way they're working hand in hand. Not all one person or entity will have all the power. Depends upon what model you're using. But the ability to do that really does help out because, as a customer, your main thing is really making sure that data is safe, especially if you're housing the data. If you're using something like a model such as infrastructure as a model, okay? So it's really just going to depend on which deployment model you're going to be looking at. Now, secure by design, and we talked about this before, this is thinking about security in the beginning. Right? In the beginning, when you're just starting out, when you're creating your different network flow diagrams or topology diagrams or creating that application as well, we want to have security in line with that. So you want to design a workload around that, around how can we utilize our encryption? How can we go about having data at rest encrypted or data in transit encrypted? So we want to be sure to have secure by design. And then you have your zero trust model where it's all about, I'm not going to really trust in its totality our entity, our third party, or even the entity right next to us, but we'll at least go through the process of understanding how to utilize multi-factor authentication as well too. Now, let's talk about some of the key security aspects of the cloud environment. Now, if you properly configure your IAM device, whether that be on cloud or on-prem, you want to be able to apply the least privilege principles like we always talked about, giving that user the only amount of power they really need to get the job done and not being able to, regain or get compromised in a sense, especially if that training is involved. And then you have your data security. This is another layer of security we have to look more into. And this is all about ensuring that the data, like I just spoke about, is protected at rest or in transit, or if it's in storage, however we want to go about it. These are ways we can do that using AES or using HTTPS when we're looking to transmit that data, because remember, the S is secure. You don't want to use HTTP. That's all about clear text. And then thinking about it in the way beginning, what ports are there available on that system already? How many open clear or open text protocols do we have on? So we want to be able to understand that there are layers to how we go about securing our environments. And it really is going to start with, what is our boundary? What type of protection do we have on the network boundary? How are we able to segment the network, which leads into network security? So think about being able to use a VPN with not even having to worry about that data itself being compromised, because it's an end-to-end encryption or site-to-site VPN. And then being able to monitor, like we always talk about, continually monitoring, because this is going to prevent any threats. It's going to be able to really detect something that's happening, especially if you have a CM in place. Or if you have an IDS and IPS in place, it's going to pretty much going to give us a leg up in a sense, right? Because we're trying to prevent that threat actor from gaining access. We're trying to prevent data breaches by mitigation through the use of encryption, through access controls that we talked about before, especially if it's role-based, if you're looking at it from a user perspective, and then being able to validate that compliance is actually there with the use of standards, with the use of set of controls that we are trying to adhere against. Your insider threats, for instance. To counter this, you can use role-based access controls, RBAC. Or you can look at real-time monitoring because it's going to allow you to understand, oh wow, our user Bob has logged in 5 times, once in Russia, once in Boston, and back and forth again. So some best practices to put in place are going to be using MFA, having strong passwords, using penetration tests as well too, because we want to not only figure out and identify vulnerabilities, but be able to remediate and also execute our payloads on these vulnerabilities to make sure that they're actually true or not, because that's what's going to really give us the test. That's what the pen testers, at least on the other side of things, right, are going to be utilizing, our threat actors is going to be utilizing, as well as our ethical hackers, because again, we're just doing the same thing, but more so in a way of how can we protect the organization. Another best practice is going to be backing up your data. You have to. Do full backups, incremental backups. Even if you're using VPNs, you want to make sure that you're using the best security possible. These are all about best practices. Using the most strongest encryption standards. Using VPN software that's accredited as well too, and that you know for sure it's good. Or not downloading any type of security software that's not necessarily on that actual site. Now, one of the real world examples is going to be having an e-commerce website within the public cloud. So think about it. You have public, private, you have hybrid. But if you want to scale, a good way to do this in a way that is still secure, especially if you're talking about a public cloud, is to have IAM in place, being able to define the different roles and ensuring that the developers and administrators and even the analyst or even the specialists that have access to this information is only going to be relevant to that role. So we can't have a data analyst being able to see the same things that a senior software analyst would be able to be. Okay? And then implementing that TLS, SSL, like we talked about, HTTPS. This is going to really secure the information that's going back and forth between these different platforms and the users themselves too. And then having, like we talked about, the perimeter firewalls. It's all about what can we bring in, what can we bring out. It's all about the ACLs. And then using something more of advanced security protection measures, like your web application firewall goes a step above that, being able to block based on content, being able to block certain, malicious or suspicious requests, right? Like your SQL injection, seeing that there's an escape character there or attack here, or prevent DDoS attacks as well too. So think about it from that standpoint. And even there are tools like AWS CloudTrail that's going to allow you to audit the platform to make sure that dynamically you're scanning for these vulnerabilities and being able to ensure that if an organization does, and in fact, we're talking about an e-commerce platform, that the organization is following and adhering to PCI DSS for compliance, especially if they're taking that credit card information. It's been great. Gennaro here, CEO of Quitech Solutions, your lead instructor. And we just talked about cloud security, brought to you by ACSMI. Hope you have a great one. Take care.